Hopefully y'all can hear me. If not, please post a question stating that you can't hear me in the questions box. But anyway, it would be easiest if all questions got posted here. Although I will try to address some of the general themes on Piazza. But yeah, in the question and answer box would be the easiest place for questions. Awesome, thank you. I guess I'll just start out with thanks everyone for coming. Looking forward to a good semester, and welcome. Howdy. Well, all right, since there are no, oh, there's a question. All right. Okay. Yep, that is normal. It's okay if you see, the other lines of the graph peeking out, but it's also okay if you only see one line. As long as there are no lines all the way at the bottom, all the way at 0, you are fine. One thing you do want to make sure of is that it did graph 3 links. So there should be three links in the key of the graph. And the best thing is just to double check your topology and make sure it matches what we laid out in the assignment. But yes, it is very normal to see one or really only one or just 1 or 2 colors in the graph. That's fine. Okay, so this one is about assigning the ports in the when creating the links, and as long as the way it works out, link 1 for each switch is active, you will be fine, because that's the link that gets graphed, and that's what the evaluation is based on. It would certainly be safer to specify the port numbers, just to be sure. But thinking about it, if you only assign if you assign them in order and you only make the necessary links, they should get the right assignments anyway. So as long as nothing else is going on with your topology, that should be fine. But again, to be safe, it may be helpful to go back and specify the ports explicitly. And if anyone, if I don't fully address your question, please feel free to ask follow-ups. Certainly try my best, but sometimes I misinterpret or miss things. So absolutely feel free to ask follow-up questions or, clarify existing questions. Sure thing. Okay, with respect to this error, I am not familiar with that error. However, one thing you may be running into is sometimes Mininet state will get confused. And you can run a command sudo mn-c, and that will clear out Mininet state, and that may help you. I will go and look to see if I can find any more information about this error. Again, it's not one I'm familiar with, so I'm going to see if I can mark this question as not resolved yet, and I'll go research it. It looks like I can't defer the question. I guess I will go research that right now. But again, my gut reaction is to ask you to try sudo mn-c. That will clear out Mininet state and hopefully allow you to create the new topology as your modified topology with no trouble. Okay. So actually, I did find in a Google search, I found that exception, and file exists does absolutely point to a likelihood that Mininet state is corrupt, and running sudo mn-c will clear it out. Basically, what happens is Mininet sets up a whole lot of infrastructure for you, and depending on how you change things, how you rename things, it may get confused and its internal state may get corrupted and just needs to be cleared out. If you're able to, please go to your VM, run that command now. And if that does not correct the problem, let me know and I'll keep looking at it. Glad to help. And I think that's a good idea. As far as the bwm.txt file goes, as long as the graph looks okay, you can be sure that for the purposes of this assignment, the bwm.txt file is correct. There will be future assignments that require a little bit more out of that file, but the requirements for that will be clear at that time. So as long as your graphs look right, that's what matters for this. And obviously, as long as you've set up the topology correctly, that's what's important for this assignment. And again, we've talked about I think this question got asked while I was still talking this one over. So hopefully you're able to verify that the suggested command fixes this. And if not, we'll keep looking at it. That is a good question. I will need to double check. My initial reaction is that it should be from, you know, I'm not going to say anything until I double check. So let me confirm that. Okay, so the plot is of transmit rates, and it's looking at the first port on each switch. So that, given the topology, let me look at the topology real quick. Okay. So that is a good question. At the end of the day, I don't think the order matters, but I do believe data is actually going from the rightmost host in the graph to the leftmost host. Although, again, it's not important for the purposes of this assignment. And as long as the graph shows up with correct looking values, it should be okay. If you're seeing that your graph isn't coming out how you expect it to, and you have more specific concerns about this, let me know. Let's see here. Okay, you asked the following question. Let me see that one. Since we're testing. That would make sense. Again, let me verify. I think I can verify that more easily than the last part. Okay, so for what I'm looking at, that seems correct. But again, the graph is your best way to verify this, and just making sure the data is getting through as expected. Because it can get a little bit confusing which way the data is flowing and what the ports actually mean. Let me address some of the other questions, and I will actually run an experiment on this and get back to you about these. So I will verify this for you in just a minute. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Sean. If you could clarify, or if there's something you think, maybe you think I should actually update a conversation on Piazza, let me know. Okay, so just to clear up, this has been a slight confusion we've seen in a couple posts on Piazza. Just want to make sure this is clear for everyone. Ports with respect to this assignment are talking about Ethernet ports on switches and hosts. We're not talking about TCP ports that you would use for talking with services on the internet. So we're not talking about like port 80, which is your standard HTTP port, or 443, which is the HTTPS port. We're talking about if you think about your router at home, your standard internet router or a switch that you would use to connect multiple computers in a network. We're talking about the physical things you plug an Ethernet cable into. That's what we mean by ports here. So yes, they are basically just sequence numbers of the connections on the switch. If I did not do a good enough job clearing that up, let me know and I will try again. Okay, great. I'm glad that that resolved it. So just for future reference, if you run into problems with unexpected exceptions or failed links in Mininet, the command sudo mn-c will clear out its state and hopefully resolve that problem. So I'm glad it did in this case. So yeah, this reinforces the point I was trying to make. Exactly. Port is where the Ethernet cable would plug in. Okay, regarding the best way to verify the topology that we programmed in with Mininet, I assume you're talking about the more complex topology that we don't have graphs for or anything else. We just asked you to run some experiments on it. The best way to verify it is to use the ping commands and the ping all to make sure that all of the hosts are connected and that all of the links are active and that the bandwidth, or I'm sorry, that the latencies are roughly what you would expect, and also the number of packets lost are roughly what you would expect. As long as those sanity checks work out and you double check the actual link configurations, you should be good to go. But yeah, the best verification is just to run packets through the system and make sure they get where they're supposed to be. Okay, so this question's asking about the text file that gets generated. Those extra interfaces are an artifact of the system. It's actually tracing your virtual machine's host ports. You don't need to worry about them. They're just artifacts in that file. Okay. All right, and I'm not sure I understand this question. Would you please clarify what you're asking? Yes, I'm not sure what this question is getting at. So if you could please clarify, and I will try to answer. For now, I'm going to go do some research to see if I can't better understand and better convey the question about which should be source port and which should be desk port. Okay, so if you're asking if you need to specify which ports are being used for the complex topology on the which ports of the switches connect to where, no, as long as the topology is in the correct format, in other words, the switches are hooked up and the hosts are hooked up as the diagram shows, we don't need the connections to be made on specific ports. That is, your interpretation is correct. And getting back to the question about which should be about source port and desk port. So when you create the link, the source port is the port that packets will flow from, and the desk port is the source that the packets will flow to. So in that case, and since we are graphing transmit, I believe, all right, I need to go finish the experiment. I'm sorry, I'm not doing a great job of answering that one. I will try harder. And great, I'm glad that answered that one. So for the first part, the best way to verify that you have the correct topology and configuration is to look at the graph. As long as you have any line that is plotted. So it may be 1, it may be 2, it may be 3, just depending on your system, depending on how it ran. They may all be stacked on each other, or you may see some variance. It really depends. But as long as any line that gets graphed approaches the value you set for the bandwidth, and it ran for 60 seconds, you have the first part right. For the second part, the best way to verify it is to run packets through the system using ping and make sure that the link characteristics match your expectation. And also that all hosts are connected, and that when you run pings through the system, it hits the links in the order you'd expect them to be hit. And then the other thing is just reread the deliverables described in the project. You know, a lot of this is just being careful, paying attention to detail. And the best verification is just to double check what you're turning in. And yes, thank you for offering, but I am afraid that may be too much to show. I'm getting close to having an experiment running that will help me better answer the existing question. I'm not quite there yet. So actually, one thing I just remembered or reread as I was going through this, it's important to note that if you don't specify, I may have already said this earlier, sorry. If you don't specify port 1 and port 2 in your add link, they will be allocated in the order that you call add link. So that's something to keep in mind as you're doing this. I am still trying to come up with a definitive answer for which side should be the source and which side should be the destination, although my gut is still telling me that it actually does not matter for our purposes. Okay, going to go back to questions. All right, thanks for that confirmation. I'm still working on getting a better answer for this because I know I'm leaving it a little bit unclear right now. But it sounds like as long as they're added in the right order, we're good. And I just need to make sure I have a real answer for which side we want the data, basically which direction we expect the data to flow in. With respect to grading, so what we do is we run an auto grader on these. We basically run a script that checks that the graph is within certain parameters and that the files have the expected values in them, and that the complex topology has been set up correctly. In addition to the auto grader's output, which will have basically points. The autograder will also generate text feedback for any points that were missed. And just as a historical note, we do a manual pass over any projects that miss points just to make sure the autograder didn't make a mistake. So if there are any lost points, a human grader will have at least reviewed it and made sure that it was correct in taking away those points. The actual point breakdown is described in the assignment description. Basically, it is 10 points for turning in all of the files and having a reasonable amount of work done to each file. In other words, even if nothing works, you get 10 of the 50 points for just making an effort and turning in all the files. 15 points is for the MN topo pi file, having the correct rate set and the correct rate graph coming out, as well as having the links set up appropriately. And then 25 points is for the complex topology and complex topo.pi, making sure it has the correct structure, the correct link values, etc. So that's grading. I'm not 100% sure I will answer this question well enough, so please follow up if I don't. That value is a target that Mininet will try to hit. But if you only send one packet through, obviously you can only get 100% or 0%. So it's going to depend on how many packets you send through. You would have to send many, many, many packets to see the actual loss percentage. And also keep in mind that loss percentage is per link. So if you run a packet through multiple links and each of those links has some loss percentage, then you will lose more packets than you would expect. Again, if that doesn't fully answer your question, please follow up, because I'm not certain I hit it all. Yes, so you are asked to modify the simple topology, and those modifications should be retained. In other words, after you've made the changes, keep the changes. That is how it should be turned in. And that is correct. It is port 1 on the switches that is graphed. And we are only graphing the switches. So the host, it really doesn't matter which ports you're using for the hosts. And again, I'm still trying to nail down a real answer for which direction the data is flowing. I don't have it yet. So if I'm missing something in this question, let me know. But yes, the host ports shouldn't matter, and it is port 1 on the switches that we're graphing, and it is the value that we transmit. It's the value being transmitted from those ports that is graphed. And I guess I'll just add that the best way to make sure it's right is to look at the graph. If the graph shows the right value, then the setup is great. Yes, that is correct. And if that answers the overall question, please let me know, and I'll quit struggling with it. If not, I'll keep looking. But yes, that is what you said there is correct. That is not a problem at all. So the congestion window is, we'll learn a lot more about it later in the course. We'll have a whole assignment around doing different things to modify how the congestion window works. It is irrelevant to this assignment, and it's fine that it changes every time you run it. It's going to depend a little bit on the conditions of your system and anything else running at the time. Okay, and I finally have what I hope is a reasonable answer for the direction the data is flowing. The data is flowing from the sender to the receiver, as well, should have been clear to me, but wasn't at first. Sorry about that. And it is flowing from the sender to the receiver. And so as long as the data is being sent out of port 1 of each switch, in other words, port 1 on each switch is the transmit port, then your graph will be right and everything should be fine. That's a good question. That I'm not certain why you're seeing that result. Let me try it on my end, and we'll see what I see. Again, it's not a perfect process. It's you know, a probabilistic process, so some variance is expected, although 7 is certainly quite different from 4. So let me just check it out and see. I assume you've run multiple experiments, and are you consistently getting 7%, or is that just one try? Yep. Thank you, Christian. That is exactly correct. The ping has to go back and forth. I really should have thought that. Sorry. It's apparently been a long day for me. So yes, with a loss rate of 4, you would expect something near 8%. So yeah, that would explain that result. And the other thing to keep in mind is for grading purposes, we actually we just inspect the topology that's created. So as long as the number you enter is correct, that's really what matters for grading. But actually, I'm really glad someone chimed in with that answer, because that is exactly the result I am seeing on my end as well. And it makes sense when you consider that the ping has to go both ways across that link. And yep, some variance is definitely expected. And your classmate provided a great answer for this. So thank you. Sure thing. And again, thank you to your classmate for helping out there. So we've got about 5 minutes left before everyone drops off. I just want to say thanks for coming. Thanks for contributing and participating. And I'll stick around for 5 minutes for any more questions. But again, to those who came, thank you. Yep, sure thing. Thank you all. Probably not every Tuesday. No, I set up this one specifically for Project One. Likely, Michael Brown, the head TA, will run any well, actually, I'm not sure about project specific office hours in the future. I know I ran this one just because of how timing worked out. The standard ones are the ones that the professor and Michael will be holding. Any other extra ones will announce beforehand. There likely will be future project specific ones. I don't think they'll have a regular schedule. I think they'll be scheduled as needed. Sure thing. And again, thanks to everyone that came out. No worries. Glad you made it. Could you clarify your question a little bit? It's kind of general. What specifically about the use of ports in simple topology? I know I kind of fumbled through that earlier. I'm not sure if you're asking about what I was talking about earlier. If you're asking fresh. But basically, I guess I'll start talking, and if you could ask another question that has a little bit more specific information in it. So in the simple topology, you're hooking up a host. You're hooking up two hosts through, what is it? Let me look at the picture to make sure I get this right, because it's late and I'm tired. You're hooking up two hosts through three switches. So there will be one port used on each host and two ports used on each switch. The important things to think about are that the ports we graph in that rate picture, in that rate graph, those are the first port on the switch. And we graph the amount of data being transmitted from that port. So the way that you configure them, it should be that the data flows out of the first port of each switch. So if that answers your question, great. If not, please post a follow-up. I'll stick around for another couple minutes just to make sure. If I happen to miss your follow-up question, please post it to Piazza, and I'll do what I can there. And then I saw another question, but it seemed to disappear. If whoever asked that got their answer, great. If not, please repost it because it disappeared on my end. No, sorry. I understand. I'm fumbling a little bit with how I'm saying that. All of the switches should be hooked up so that data flows out of port 1 for that switch. In other words, data would flow into, data would be received on port 2, and it would be transmitted from port 1 because we graph port 1. We specifically, we graph the data transmitted from port 1. However, at the end of the day, to eliminate confusion, just look at the graph. If the graph has the correct data, then your connections are correct. Rather than overthinking it and worrying about specifically which port is hooked up, if the graph is right, then the connections are correct. And that's really what matters. Okay. Okay, yes, it is absolutely possible to get reasonable looking outputs without specifying the ports directly because the ports are used in the order you make links. So the assignment goes through talking about how hosts, the ports start at number 0, and switches, the ports start at number 1. And the first link you add for a host or a switch takes the lowest available port and increments from there. So if you don't specify any, but you do build the links in the order the assignment suggests, you will get the correct results. And I'll say it again, the best way to verify it is to look at the rate graph. If the rate graph is correct, then it means everything was hooked up right. And when I say correct, what I mean is that you have no lines at 0. Any line you see, and it may only be 1, depending on your machine and your environment. It may be 1, it may be 2, it may be 3. All lines on the graph are non-zero. They should approach the value set for the bandwidth of the links. So that's the best way to verify your setup. The usual causes for getting a lower bandwidth than you expect is other load on your system. So anything running in the background. This system runs a set of containers inside of a virtual machine running on a host machine. So there's a lot of layers of indirection there. It's not exactly the most performant system on Earth. So if you're seeing lower bandwidth than you would expect, it may just be to the environment of your system. However, if it looks really smooth, then I would definitely go and look at your link configurations again. Usually when there's some sort of host-related performance problem, the graph is very rough. There's a lot of peaks and valleys. So if it's very smooth, but it's not the value you expect, then there probably is something wrong with your configuration. And something you should look into. And if it's 0, then the biggest likelihood is that the data is not flowing the direction you expect it to be flowing. And you might try reversing the ordering or just double checking the ordering with how the assignment says to check it to set it up. And yeah, if you're still seeing results that you don't expect, I would say bring it up on Piazza. Again, not including too much detail for academic reasons, but definitely if it's smooth and low, it's something to look into. If it's really jittery, just look into your system, see if you can cut off any background processes. Sure thing. So I think that addresses everything outstanding. Again, thanks everyone for coming out. This recording should be available. I think that's how it works. I think that's why we do Hangout Center. And any follow-up questions, anything further, absolutely feel free to interact with us on Piazza. Thanks and have a good night.